Okay, so I am going to give you guys a very short demonstrations on how I use the 12 principle of recalls to memorize large volume of information. Okay, so I'm going to start with a topic that is very important to the bar examiners, and it's very important to you as well. It's frequently tested, the subject of wills. Okay, so I'm going to use the subject of wills in a very short video to show you how you can use those principles to remember any subject. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It so happened that I'm using wheels to give you these demonstrations. Okay, not all 12 principles are going to be applicable, obviously, in any given situation, but the majority of it will. Um, so we start with the first principle, which is to create a map. And you remember what a map stands for. It's a memory action plan. So how do we create a map for wheels? So we create a map for wheels by organizing the material. So in a sequence that's actually logical and that's actually makes sense, and that you can weave in from one information to the next. So we'll start with validity would be our number one in our roadmap. Okay, and remember that when you create a roadmap, is that um, each fork of the road should lead you to the next one. So validity, we start with validity of the will would be our first step on the journey to wills, and the second part would be formations of the will. Okay, so validity of the will, is the will valid? Second, the formations of the will, how the will is formed. And third is revocations, right? Revocations and revival. Revocations and revival. And that would be our number four. So number one is validity. Number two is formations. Number three, revocation. Number four, revival. Number five, number five would be distributions of the wills. Distributions of the will. Number six, potential issues that may come up with the distributions of the will. And number seven is intestacy. Intestacy, the law of intestacy, to die without a will. So this would be our roadmap. That's the map that you would follow. In any given essays, you will have to answer some of those questions that we just talked about. Those seven questions. That's where your essays will come up. Not necessary in all seven, but the by examiners will use some or most of those main questions to write the exam. So that's the roadmap. With that being the roadmap, what we're going to do then, we go back with every single question. Seven question, is the will valid? Second questions, the is the will legally formed? Do we meet the formality, the requirement of the formations of the will? Number three, if the will is formed, is it revoked? Right? If the will revoke, and if the will is revoked, can we revive it? Can we revive it? That's the revival. And if we revive the wills, so we have a legally formed will, what how do we distribute the wills? How the will is being distributed? And are there any potential issues that may come up with distributions? And last, um, how people who will take under the will, or well, without, if the ancestor they die without a will, how do we resolve those issues? So we're going to deal real quick with very quick with the validity, would be in the very first questions. Hopefully, if I have time, I can do formation as well. But see, so you start with the story. That's where your imagination would come up. That's where your we talked about this being the second principle of recall. Um, bring your imaginations into the forefront of of studying for this bar exam. So you have to think creatively, be creative. For me, I start with a story, starting with grammar. So we're dealing with wills. Although necessarily will is not made for all people, anybody can and should have a will, but most of the time we think that will is being written by all people. For that reason, I started with grammar. So for the validity of a will, for a will to be valid, there must be what? There must be capacity. There must be capacity. And what is required for capacity? What is required for grammar to have capacity? Well, for grammar to have capacity, grammar must be what? Of age. That is, grammar is 18 years old or older. Well, grammar is grammar. Grammar is 75 years old. So grammar is old, 75 years old. So grammar met the first requirement, the requirement of age. The second requirement is that of the capacity, on the capacity for the validity of the will, there is capacity. The first requirement is capacity. Grammar must have capacity to write the will. Capacity means grammar is of age and grammar is of sound mind. Age and sound mind. So those are the two requirements grammar must first um, meet in order to uh, uh, for grammar as well to be considered valid, right? We're still under the first fork of the word validity of the will, and which is on the validity of the will, we need to determine before we even begin to form the will, before we even begin to write a will, we must determine if grammar has capacity. And capacity means what? Two things: sound of age, be 18 or older, and be of sound mind. And what does sound mind mean? Sounds mind mean grammar must not have a defect of reasons, right? And we all remember from law school the theory of insane delusion. Insane delusion means a disease of the mind that affect grammar's um, capacity to write a will, so to speak. So you see how from um, sound mind we weave into basically um, is grammar have an insane delusions. So with that in mind, with insane delusions, if grammar does not have insane delusion, can she validly create a will? To create a will, and I'm saying this to lead us to the next issues. I want to show you how you create a link, a chains of event, which is one of the principle of recalls, right? You create a link, a chains of events with the issues. So necessarily, sound mind would lead us to intent, because if grandma does not have a sound mind, she cannot create a will with her own volition. So intent will be our next issue on the validity of the will. So the first few issues we dealt with on the capacity was of age, be of sound mind, and the third issues, sound mind lead us to the third issues, which is intent. And intent will lead us again to the fourth issues on their capacity. Because if grandma's intent may be taken away, right, by some other third party, by some other third party. How? Well, by influence grammar. So we are dealing with the issue of undue influence. Undue influence. So I want you to see how the story that I'm telling you, how it's a link and connect, and you can tell the same story to anybody, anytime, and you won't have any problem remembering those legal principles that you need to write your real exam. So we are under the issues of undue influence right now. Is grammar was under influence when she wrote her words? So what is undue influence? Undue influence, we create the mnemonic SOUP, SOUP. To show undue influence, we must show that grammar number one was susceptible to be influenced. That's S on the SOUP. Number two, we must show the influencer has opportunity. That's O for SOAP, S-O, has opportunity to influence grammar. That's number two on the elements on the undue influence. So we're doing the elements of undue. You see how I'm giving you the elements step by step and in a logical manner without faulted. Okay. So the third element on the undue influence would be unnatural gift. Unnatural gift for SOU, SOU, right? And P would be for participation. So we have we have to determine if the will is valid, sound mind, of age, intent, undue influence. And on the undue influence, I just give you the elements you need under the mnemonic SOUP, SOUP. S for successibility. Always have difficulty with this word. And then number two would be opportunity. The second element for undue influence, opportunity. The third element would be unnatural gift. Grandma give a gift that is not naturally what a sane person would do or somebody with the right mindset would do. So it's an unnatural gift. And number the last element for undue influence is participation. Did the influencer had participate in influencing grandma? If you find those four elements, then the will could be invalidated. Okay, so you're done with undue influence. Now I want you to see how undue influence, creating a chain link of event in my story, bring me to the next issue. What would be my next issue? Because I'm still under the validity of the will. So, and we did under validity of the will, the age requirement, 18 years old or older, the sound mind requirement, the intent requirement, undue influence we are now. So we must determine weaving to undue influence to fraud. Those are things that could take away grandma's intent. Okay, with the undue influence can take grandma's intent. Fraud can take grandma's intent, and mistake also can negate grandma's intent. Okay, all those things could potentially invalidate the will. And they are logical. They follow a chain link of event that should lead you from one issue to the next without any problem. Because I'm not kidding you, it works. Okay, it works for me, and I know it works for you. And I'm not doing this to impress you, but to express upon you what is possible. Okay, so I hope you can see how doing it this way will forever embedded those information into your brain. So you're not just studying for the bar exam, you are starting to know those stuff and know them very well long after your bar exam. Okay. So we said after undue influence, we go necessarily within to fraud. Those are things that can negate intent, right? So once you go to intent, you ask, what are the things that can negate, take away grandma's intent? We say undue influence could do that. Duress can do that. Fraud can do it, and mistake can do it. And that's all that is required, really, for you to analyze whether a will is valid or not. Okay. So on the fraud, there are two types of fraud. And we talked about it earlier when we give an example for fraud in the factum and fraud in the inducement, which is also a pattern that you will see in property when we're talking about the validity of a deed in property. A deed could be invalidated for fraud in the factum or fraud in the inducement or mistake in the factum or mistake in the inducement, and so on and so forth. Here, the same thing could happen. Grandma's will can be invalidated if there was fraud in the factum. What does fraud in the factum means? Fraud in the factum means that grandma signs a wrong document. So I say, Grandma, you're signing this list so I can rent this property for you. But instead of a list, it was a will Grandma signed and leaving all his property for me. This will invalidate the entire will. That is fraud in the factum. The document that Grandma thought she was signing is actually not the document she signed. She thought she's signing a list, instead she signed a will. So that will invalidate the entire world. Forwarding the inducement means a portion of the worlds will be invalidated because Graham actually knew she was signing a will, but instead it's a portion or a gift that she gave is misleading because someone misled grandma into giving a gift that she shouldn't. So that part of the gift will be invalidated. So a mistake, I'm sorry, fraud in the inducement will not necessarily invalidate the entire world. It will invalidate that portions of the world. And then the next issue after fraud, necessarily, what else can negate grandma's intent? It's mistake. And while there are two kind of fraud, there are three kind of mistake. Okay, there are two kind of fraud. There are three kind of mistake. There's also mistake in the factum, which is means you analyze this almost the same way you would analyze a fraud in the inducement, except that here grandma is the one making the mistake, right? A fraud is by a third party, but a mistake is grandma made a mistake in the factum. She signed a wrong document by her own mistake. She's old. She signed a wrong document. And for the, I'm sorry, mistake in the inducement, again, she left a gift that she should not have left because of a mistake. She believed that her son is dead when the son is alive. So therefore, she made a mistake by leaving him out. Okay, so that would be your mistake in the inducement. And then the third mistake is mistake in the description. Basically, the wrong descriptions. Grandma said she lived 123 Main Street, but grandma's property is 231 Main Street. So mistake in the description, all those things can have potentially invalidate the will. Okay, so that's it for now. I could go on. I could do the entire wills using the same story without any without faulted, basically, without any fault, and 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 necessarily I could weave in from one issue to the next, but for the sake of time, I don't want to commit, give you a too long video to take your time, but I hope you find this information useful to you. If you do, give me a thumbs up. Okay, we will create another video. I'm probably gonna do maybe PR, professional responsibility that we test all the time, and in some other topic we'll do next. Okay, thanks so much. Hope you find this helpful.